We're glad you're here. I'm Linda Rapon. I'm the chair of the Housing and Human Services Commission. And this is an incredibly valuable opportunity for us to share information with you and to hear from you. So it may look like with this very long, impressive panel up here that you're not going to get a chance to say something, but you will. So we're going to do some presentations first, and then have some Q&A time. So if there's like things you want to say as an advocate, if there are questions you want to ask about the presentations or anything else, like just keep those, write them down if you think you're going to forget, so you'll be ready to go. I would just like to introduce a couple of people before we get started. Mayor Julie Akins is here. Thank you for being here. Councilor Gina DeKeen, who is not only a city council member, but the liaison to the Housing Commission. Most of the Housing Commission is here. Would you guys stand up? Very glad to have all of you here. Linda Reed is our staff from the city, without which we would be floundering badly. So, huge appreciation to Linda. So our panel of presenters here this afternoon, what is it? We're in the dark. There's no windows here. It could be morning. Brendan Goldman is the long-range planner for the city of Ashland, who's going to be making a presentation. Wave. Deanne Everson is the executive director of United Way. Melanie Dosher is the support services director for Access. John Vollmer is the housing director for Access. Bren Morrison is the financial systems manager for the city of Ashland, and Judy Hedgepeth is customer service for city of Ashland. We've got all the people here that can answer the questions, so just be ready. We're going to start with a presentation by Brandon, which is sort of where we are in a process and what this means as part of that process. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Linda. And thank you all for coming. And as Linda mentioned, I'm going to try and go over some of the context of housing within Ashland. I know that everybody in this room is likely familiar with the issues that we're wrestling with in terms of housing affordability within the community. But I think it does help to kind of look at demographic information. And I know there's people that both love numbers and people that hate numbers. So I'll show them on the screen, and those of you that want to absorb them, do so. We have them available on our website if you want to look at a deeper dive into them. But I won't dwell on the numbers, but I do think that it helps to kind of show where we are in terms of Ashland demographics, namely changing population demographics, and aging population, slow population growth, as well as issues in terms of housing market with high housing costs, small household sizes. And what this leads to, and part of the reason that this event is being put on, one of a number of reasons, but is the city's actively working on developing what's called a housing production strategy. And that is a more comprehensive approach to looking at housing issues in Ashland and developing a plan where strategic actions can be taken over an 8-year period that will effectively produce more housing production. So there's a lot of stuff in the housing arena that isn't really related to housing production directly. And we can answer questions about that, and other panelists can speak to helping people afford the homes that they're in. But the housing production strategy is really focused on addressing the changing demographics. Up here is a presentation of Ashland's population growth and where we're going. Essentially, we have a population of 22,473 currently, but we have a very slow population growth. The green line there shows that over the next 50 years, we will increase in population by just less than 3,000 people. So it's a slow population growth, and that the reasons for that are interesting and, again, somewhat intuitive, is Ashland's population is aging. So this graph shows that in 2000, 18% of our population was over 60 years old. Today it's 31%. So that's a dramatic increase in a short period of time. And also we're seeing a decrease in the age cohorts that are typically having children. And so birth rates are less than death rates, declining population. We would be seeing a negative population growth if it were not for in-migration. So when I showed that earlier graph of it increasing in population over the next 50 years, it's mostly from people moving into the community. And then when we look at the household sizes in Ashland, I think it reflects a combination of aging households as well as student populations. The graphic here shows that essentially 3/4 of the households in Ashland are either 1 or 2 person households. And only 1 out of 5 households has children in that household. So these are important statistics to look at when we're looking at housing production in terms of what types of housing are going to be needed for that population growth in the future. And another issue is really cost burden, which I know is a major issue with this event tonight, to look at how people are rent burdened. The graphic here shows that, as again intuitive, the lower one's income, the greater percentage of those populations are rent burdened. And to use the light blue bar here is people that are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. The dark blue bar is people that spend more than 50% of their income on housing. And obviously, as you get to $75,000 or more per year, there's very few people that are rent burdened or ownership burdened at that income level. However, as this next slide shows, the number of people that make less than $52,000 per year, essentially less than 80% the median income, it accounts for, I think, 48% of our population. But when you look at even people that are high income or middle income, the people in the red area also are priced out of the housing market in terms of purchase. So even high income households, if they don't make more than 165% the median income, can't afford a median income home for purchase in Ashland. And Ashland is an expensive market. As you all know, within the Rogue Valley, here are a number of other cities. Jacksonville shows high. They don't have as much housing turnover in a given year, so statistics can be skewed by 1 or 2 high-value homes. Nonetheless, it's interesting to note that Phoenix at 415,000, Eagle Point at 410, that's where Ashland was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So when we talk about this as an Ashland issue, it's not exclusively. It's a Rogue Valley issue. It's a state of Oregon issue. Ashland, unfortunately, is ahead of the curve in this area. And so, but the rest of the valley is catching up, and quickly. Part of the reason I brought up incomes and median housing costs was to try and illustrate that incomes have remained relatively flat over the last decade. This chart shows that between 2010 and 2020 and 21, there has been an increase in incomes. So this blue bar is the median family income, somebody making 100% the area median income. This orange bar is how much house they could afford with that income, assuming a 20% down payment, a loan at 5%. So back in 2010, somebody could afford a $180,000 house. Fast forward to 2021, incomes have increased to a median of $73,000, which increases their purchasing power to $320,000. But you can see this last bar is the escalating housing costs in that period of time. So even though, even back in 2010, people were priced out because the median income was $285,000, the gap between $180,000 and $285,000 was $100,000. Now the gap is $230,000. So that's a lot of money to increase your down payment in order to afford your monthly mortgage payments. And this portion of the graph, I think, is entirely relevant when we're talking about how do we create affordable housing in Ashland for median income ownership. That's the amount of subsidy that typically has to be put into a unit to make it affordable when compared to market rate units. So to put into context what those incomes relate to, this graph, and I won't go into all the details, but it shows you at that median income level, where I was showing on the last graph the purchasing power, there we're talking about police officers, electricians, librarians, nurses. So it is an income level that is not high income earners. It's really the middle income. And again, those individuals are priced out of Ashland's housing market already. And rents are also increasing. So this table shows that if somebody's making $36,600 a year, they can afford a monthly rent of $920. The median rent currently, or the current asking rent, we don't have really great data on rents, but is $15,500. So a two-bedroom unit, somebody would have to make $62,000 a year in order to afford a rental unit on the open market today. So that's the context part where I was given lots of numbers. If there's any questions on those, I can ask them, but the next step is to move on to the housing production strategy. And I can go through that, and I know the panel's up here to ask questions of throughout the evening, so we can go back to any of those if necessary. So developing a housing production strategy is a multi-step process that takes about 18 months. Currently, we've done a number of steps in terms of identifying what the needed housing types are in Ashland. And this is part of stakeholder engagement, and we'll talk more about that later. But the idea is to develop a list of strategies that the city can employ. So again, these are strategies that are within the city's domain to really look at how we can equitably provide housing to all residents in Ashland. And with that, one of the goals is to look at strategies that achieve fair and equitable housing. So again, I won't go through the individual items, but just touch on the components. So when we talk about what can the city do, it's important to recognize that the city itself can't wave a magic wand and require all units to be affordable. There's market feasibility is one aspect that, in order for a project to be developed, is what this chart is going to show, that there needs to be a number of key elements that are in place. There has to be a demand for the units to be built, or private market developers aren't going to build them. They have to have access to capital in order to fund the development. They have to be able to find land that is available and suitable for the type of housing needed. And lastly, new developments are subject to city policy. So when we talk about what the city can do, it really is in probably two areas within this. We can develop public policy that establishes density requirements for housing so that a certain number of housing are built per acre. We can look at any barriers in our ordinance that preclude or make housing more expensive to develop. Parking requirements and are one of those that comes up, or height limitations are another one that comes up. And so those are some of the strategies that we could look at. Also, land is another that the city has successfully employed in looking at surplus city property. Just as an example, I think many people in the room are probably familiar with the Housing Authority's project over on Clay Street, which at this point is 120 units of affordable housing. That was developed in partnership with the Housing Authority and the city in buying a 10-acre piece of property, and the city holding on to it for a period until the Housing Authority was ready to develop it. And that was a way, and the city sold surplus city property in order to afford the purchase of that 10-acre property. The city also worked with the Housing Authority in reducing fees, developing the road infrastructure around it. These are additional costs that typically drive up the price of housing. So that's an area where the city has some measure of contribution. So some of those existing affordable housing policies we've already done. So when we talk about the housing strategy, I know many communities that, again, are 10 years behind the city of Ashland are looking at implementing some of these policies, which we've already passed. So currently an affordable housing unit developed in Ashland doesn't have to pay any systems development charges, doesn't have to pay a number of planning fees or engineering fees. So that buys down the cost of the individual units. We also offer density bonuses. so that affordable housing units can be added to any project without taking away any market rate units. But again, it's a number of strategies that are often implemented. And then there's market rate housing, that these aren't technically affordable housing, but code implementations that have been done in Ashland that help promote needed housing types, namely accessory residential units. If somebody wants to put a unit in their backyard, they can do so with just building permits. There's no special planning process to get that approved. There used to be, but that was one of the changes we made. We also implemented a cottage housing ordinance, which allows, in lieu of large single-family detached homes, property owners or developers can develop many small units on the home, essentially 2 for 1. So instead of building 4 single-family homes on a property and partitioning it out, somebody can build an 8-unit cottage housing development, each unit less than 800 square feet, which, again, they're market rate units, so they're not technically affordable, but by merit of size, they're less costly than full-size 2,400 square foot homes that would have otherwise been built. And when we look at these strategies, it's a range of what can be considered for supporting affordable housing. Education outreach, it's valuable, it's important. Let people know how to do accessory residential units in their backyard, for example. So producing those informational resources is one low-hanging fruit in terms of a strategy, but it moves across the spectrum in terms of what's the most impactful, and we get to land acquisition, disposition of surplus city property, allocation of funding, the waiving of fees, and removing regulatory barriers. And I think all of that points to leveraging those efforts with affordable housing developers that are doing the work of putting housing units on the ground. So I'll move through these somewhat quickly, but as part of the housing production strategy, we established a number of initiatives that we're looking to achieve, namely encouraging the development of low and moderate income affordable rental housing, opportunities for affordable ownership, the creation of actually deed restricted affordable housing units. And that's important because then those stay affordable for essentially a 60-year period or up to 99 years if they're in a land trust. And also the preservation of existing low and moderate income affordable housing. And some examples of this can be both market rate housing or existing deed restricted affordable housing that might be hitting their 30-year or 60-year window at this point. But things like manufactured home parks offer an affordable housing type, and preservation of those is one of the strategies. This is going to be too small to read. Yes.
I have a quick question. With
Sure.
regard to the project that you mentioned on Clay Street.
Yeah.
So those are designated as affordable housing?
Yes.
And is it, are they actual single-family homes, or are they?
Well, they're apartments, but they look like townhomes from the outside. Yes. So it's 120 units of rental housing that are targeted to people, I think, typically making less than 60% the median income for that project.
Okay, so you don't really know how much that they would be renting for?
I don't. Linda Reed might know, but my guess is it's 800 or so per month.
Melanie, do you know?
There's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that are on site, and they range somewhere from the low 600s, late 500s, up into the 800s.
Thank you.
Yeah. And those are, because it was required as affordable housing as part of annexing into the city limits, those are deed restricted to remain affordable for at least a 60-year period. The Housing Authority, being the owner-operator of that, their goal is to keep them affordable in perpetuity. So again, we've identified a number of strategic actions that other cities have employed to look at affordable housing and how to create it. Those are what is going to be considered by the Housing and Human Services Commission, Planning Commission, and ultimately the City Council for adoption in a housing production strategy. And once completed, then the development of that housing production strategy will really set a roadmap for what we do for the 2021 or 2023 through 2031, an 8-year period. recognizing that we are not able to do all strategies in 1 year, but trying to find those that are the highest priority and do those early in the process. But we also need to get information from the community that will help inform the commissions as the policies are ultimately developed, and also inform the City Council when it comes to them in 2023. In order to facilitate that, we've created an online survey. We've created printed copies here for people that want to fill out a printed copy that really identifies each of those strategic actions, as well as opportunities to provide additional ideas or additional experiences that could help inform the process. Additionally, there's a dedicated web page on the city's website about the housing production strategy that has the thick packets of information if you want to read all the detail about the different strategies and what they mean, how they've been employed elsewhere. And that is ashland.or.us/HPS for Housing Production Strategy. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. So I'm just going to pass the mic down the path here.
Linda, don't worry about mine. Are you sure? Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me. I was excited to be invited because I live in Ashland and have for 27 years. And I'm among those people who are worried if I can live here through my retirement. And that's just being honest. And so when we talk about housing burdens, we have to talk about not only utilities, which I'm grateful they're here, but you have to talk about car repairs and veterinary bills and food and all the other pressures that are on people's lives, including medicine. United Way is focused on 4 areas: education, income, health, and transportation. In our income area, we do 2 major programs. One is called Hope Chest, which is our emergency fund. We don't deal with clients directly. One important group is missing here today, and that's St. Vincent de Paul. If you're here, I'm sorry, I don't see you working. But they're our biggest referring partner, and our second largest is ORA. And we help people once a year with up to $500 a year. Throughout, and we do free income tax preparation. That's the other big income program we do. And we bring back more than $500,000 a year to people who work in our county and earn that money and get eligible tax credits. I went ahead and reviewed the investments we've made in Ashland outside of the pandemic and the wildfires. And in 2019, we helped 154 families for an average of only $271 to reduce toxic stress in people's lives. We could never reduce all the stress in anyone's life, or mine or yours or anyone's. But we do take away that toxic part. And in 2020, outside of the pandemic, we invested in 331 families and spent an average of $771. So it skyrocketed, the actual need people had. And in 2021, we helped 101 families in Ashland for an average of $521. So we saw it drop, but it was still virtually double from what it was in 2019. In the county, our average assistance in 2019 was $292, just a little bit higher than Ashland specifically. In 2020, it was $767, pretty much the same. And it dropped in 2021 to $503. So we're seeing the same thing countywide, as Brandon talked about. And so within the pandemic, United Way invested $2.4 million in over 3,400 families throughout the county. 40% of that total went to Ashland, to residents. I'm one of those reverse commuters. I drive to Medford every day for work and come back home to Ashland, and have for those 27 years. And for the fires, we've invested a total of $4.6 million in wildfire, in food and in housing, individual supports, and agency supports. And for the first time, we invested over $490,000 in actually housing construction in partnership with a really cool project that Access is involved in as well. New Spirit Village, which is the 3D imaging printed homes that are going into Medford soon, we hope. But so that's what United Way does. And if you know people who need help, the most important thing I can say today is help is there. And call, to get help from United Way, call ORA, call St. Vincent de Paul's, and we also partner with Access Countywide. And when people need help, there's help available, and we're happy to do it. That's all I'm going to talk.
It's a hard act to follow. My name is Melanie Dozier. I am the Director of Support Services for Access. Our focus with our agency is food, warmth, and shelter for our most vulnerable populations within Jackson County. I am responsible for all of the support services, so rental assistance and navigation services and homeless services that are administered within Jackson County. We work very closely with ORA, so they take care of a lot of those services that are, or a lot of the shelter service needs that exist on this side of the valley, and we do a focus more with the sheltering part with other partners as well for the other side of the valley. Pre-COVID, Access administered on average of $2 million of rental assistance with housing stabilization case management in Jackson County. And last year alone, in 2021, we administered over $15 million of rental assistance. I was not able to look to break down per county or per jurisdiction within the county, but the need has, we served over 5,000 households with that $15 million of rental assistance. Our food bank visitations have gone up 60% since the beginning of this year. So the need is there. The need is still existing even after COVID, and with all of the influx of assistance that is become available through different state and federal funded programs, the need is continuing to rise. But as Deanne said, there is a lot of help out there. I think that both our federal and our state government agencies have recognized with the need, with the COVID impact that households had, how many, I think everybody knew, right? Everybody knows, and everybody has known for a long time that there are a lot of families that exist in that unstably housed category. They may be housed, they may never have experienced being unhoused, but they are living paycheck to paycheck, and one incident is going to throw the entire plans that they have had off of the rocker, and that they need assistance. And I think that our biggest, I think about this a lot, that over 50% of people that are chronically unhoused come from some level of foster care. They've been involved in the foster care system at some point. And so how do we change that? And I think we change that by connecting with families before they have to face being unhoused, or before they have to face that trauma that can exist. That could be what pushes them off the edge to have to get involved in that care system. And so I think that the state has put a lot of resource into focus on that unstably housed, so they don't have to become homeless, so they don't have to be at imminent risk with a 72-hour eviction notice to gain access to assistance. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done. We've made a significant impact and been able to keep a lot of people housed in the units that they feel safe. I think there's a lot of work to be done in the future, but I do think that there's a lot of really cool initiatives and really cool housing programs that we all are actively paying attention to and working on that will help. Hopefully, I think a big piece of affordable rentals is moving people that are stable in rentals into homeownership. And so how do we continue to work on helping people with resources gain access to homeownership so we can move people through the continuum of stable housing. I think I just went on off a little tangent there, but I think that is just really important to know that there is help available and there are people that are very dedicated, and the need is still huge. So remaining flexible and connecting people to the resources that they need, and directing people to where they need to gain access to the resources is really important. And I also think that it's not only financial assistance, right, that people need to gain stability in their housing. I think that there's a lot of, it's hard to say I need help. And so helping people say that I need help and getting them to the people that can help them is really, really important. And I also think that there's a feeling that a lot of households have, but it's like, well, my neighbor needs it worse than I do, or this other person over here needs it worse than I do. And I think it's really valuable for us to say we've all been there and we've all needed help on some level or another. So let's let the experts or the subject matter experts determine if you're eligible or not, and at least get you connected to the resources that are out there. So that's my spiel, and now I'm going to pass it on over.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Volmar. I am the housing director for Access. As Melanie mentioned, our programs are really focused on food, warmth, and shelter. The programs that I oversee really focus on a lot of the warmth and shelter piece. Melanie's program oversees like the rental assistance, a lot of the case management, working closely with people. The programs that I oversee, one of them is our energy assistance program. It provides utility assistance for eligible households in Jackson County. There is a 60% state median income household qualification to qualify. People do not have to have a shut-off notice to get assistance. So that's something that we do hear from people from time to time is they're like, I'm behind, but I don't really have a shut-off notice, so I don't need assistance. Well, our program doesn't require that. You just have to income qualify. The program is also fuel blind, so we have funding sources that allow us to help with any fuel source there is. So whether it's, City of Ashland Electric, whether it's, a Vista for natural gas, if people are on bulk fuel, we have resources that can help with any fuel source. That program can also assist people that income qualify with HVAC repairs, so heating and cooling costs. A lot of times we have people that, may end up with no heat or no cooling situations. And as people know, with global warming going on and the summers we've had here recently, cooling is a big conversation. It's been something that our agency's focused on for many years, knowing that we have both a heating and cooling season here in Southern Oregon. So we can help with a lot of those repairs as they happen. So we focus a lot on heaters during the winter. We focus a lot on ACs during the summer because that's when people really need those services. I do want to say that our energy assistance program, it doesn't just look at the amount due on the bill. There's a matrix that's used to determine the amount that they would receive. So somebody may have, a $100 bill or something like that. They may not be past due, but we may be able to give them several $100 credit on that bill, and it may float them for several months. And for a lot of people, that's extremely important. It gives them the ability to buy food, it gives them the ability to buy medicine, different things like that, where people are having to choose what they're buying. We also have started administering a water assistance program. So some people may know that there was some federal legislation that was passed, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, for water assistance. So it is an income qualifying program as well, but we are able to help with water assistance as well. Pre-COVID, most of our appointments were in person. So we would have people bring in all their eligibility documents to us, meet with us in person. We would determine their eligibility, and then we pay them directly to the utilities on their behalf. So by the time they leave, they know what their credit is, they know what's happening. When COVID hit, we adjusted extremely quickly, and we turned to kind of a virtual model. So we started doing a lot of phone appointments, different things like that, figuring out creative ways for people to get their documents to us. I'm extremely proud of my team for the work that they did, how they shifted, and I think we're going to, coming out of COVID, I think we're going to have more of a hybrid approach. We're going to allow people to kind of choose what works best for them. So it's really taught us a lot. I think we were headed in that direction, and it forced us to fast track a lot of those conversations that we were having. Our energy assistance program, last year we assisted about 4,400 households in Jackson County. We provided just over $5 million of assistance. City of Ashland Electric is the only number that I was able to pull. Our reporting system doesn't allow us to sort by like zip code or city or different things like that. So I can only pull it by vendor. So City of Ashland Electric, we were able to assist 370 households last year. It doesn't allow me to pull the amount either, so I don't know how much we actually paid on that. But that $5 million total is energy assistance, water assistance, and it also includes COVID funds that we receive. So Access did really receive COVID funding. We typically administer about $2.5 to $3 million a year in energy assistance. We received almost $4 million of COVID funds to assist with energy assistance as well. So as Melanie spoke about the $15 million for rental assistance, there was a huge need for people who all of a sudden adjusted to being home all the time, higher energy bills, things like that. So we were able to get an influx of funds and really assist people. With our COVID funding, we were able to serve about 7,100 households. Like I said, it's about $4 million, and we assisted approximately 600, just shy of 600 City of Ashland electric participants. And then our water assistance program, like I said, it's extremely new right now. We actually have a really great relationship with City of Ashland because they administer their own electricity and water. And they were actually extremely great to work with when this water program came out. Because they administer their own program, we reached out, we said, here's this new program, will you partner with us? They said yes, they were the first ones on board. So we've administered assistance for 370 households so far, just shy of $100,000. 50 of those households were City of Ashland water participants for about $50,000. So they've gotten about half the funding. We do have a weatherization program at Access as well. So our weatherization program is designed to assist households in making energy efficient upgrades to their home to reduce their energy costs. So not only do we focus on how do we help them pay their bills, how do we help them stay stable with their utility costs, we also look at how can we help them conserve energy and reduce those energy costs. Energy efficient improvements can include things like insulation. So attic walls, floor insulation, that's kind of your number one energy saver. We look at air sealing throughout the house, duct sealing, windows, HVAC tune-up. So we do look at the heating and cooling system throughout the house. It is an income qualifying program as well, but all improvements are made free of charge. So our funding actually covers the entire cost, so as long as people income qualify, they do not have to pay anything for those improvements that are made. It is not an emergency response program, so there is a wait list for that program. So it's something that if anybody is interested in it and does income qualify, we recommend that they get on our wait list. It's just a simple application to get on the wait list. We don't even we ask you to self-declare your income to get on the wait list, but we don't check anything until it comes time for us to provide services. But it's a pretty easy process. That program is available to both homeowners and renters. So it's not something where you have to own a home to qualify. So renters can sign up as well. So if they're facing struggles in their home, the only thing our program requires of us is we do have to get owner approval before we actually come in and make the improvements. So when we come out and do the assessment of the home, determine the improvements that we can make, we would then reach out to the owner, let them know the improvements, and get them to sign off, allowing us to come in and make free improvements to a home. I don't get much pushback on that. The types of housing that are the best candidate for that program are manufactured homes or site-built homes, so single-family homes. Multifamily homes, we can do them as well, but the program likes us to look at the entire complex. So we would then have to look at income qualifying multiple households, looking at the entire multifamily complex rather than just one individual unit. So individual units are much easier for us to do through that program. Our weatherization program weatherizes approximately 110 homes a year, and over the last 10 years, we have actually weatherized 60 homes within the City of Ashland. So, quite a few. And as Melanie spoke about the kind of continuum of housing, we do administer a homeownership program within Access. And so Melanie's team actually partners really closely with my team, and she may assist them with rental assistance, things like that, but they would refer them over anybody who is interested in home ownership. And we provide home buyer education and pre-purchase counseling to anyone who's interested in it. The program is really focused on first-time home buyers, which we follow HUD's definition of just someone who hasn't been on title for the last 3 years. So it could be somebody who has owned before and still is considered a first-time home buyer. But the program really focuses on, like I said, the education, what it means to be a homeowner, what to expect, the costs involved, how to purchase, different things like that. And then the pre-purchase counseling really goes one-on-one into their scenario. So we really get to know the person, what is their goal, what are they looking to do, we connect them with resources, and we're basically that support system through the process. We also administer down payment assistance programs, so we can actually provide down payment assistance for them as long as they income qualify towards the purchase of that home. So, and we would assist them, like I said, up to that point where they purchase. And at that point, we would really just provide them resources for the future. So if they're interested, they can continue on with us if they want. A lot of people, once they purchase, they've kind of met that goal of being a homeowner. But our programs don't just stop there. So we administer other programs in our home ownership center to assist people with things like post-purchase counseling. So if they are a homeowner, they're struggling to maintain their home, they're struggling with different things, they can come back to us and we'll continue to work with them. We'll help educate them. We'll help them understand, the cost of being a homeowner, because, you can't just call your landlord and say it broke. You've got to take care of things. You've got to plan. We do foreclosure counseling as well. So if people are at risk of losing their home, we will assist them with that as well. And then we are partnering with the state's mortgage payment assistance program to connect people to funding assistance to help pay their mortgage and stay in their home. So we really try to focus on kind of that whole wraparound piece. We want to help them get that goal of purchasing a home, but then also maintain the home once they're there. We do administer a individual development account program, IDA is what it's called, which is a savings match program. We help people with that program towards either home purchase or home repair. It's a 5-to-1 match program, so if people income qualify, for every dollar they save, they get a $5 match, up to a $9,000 max match. So if they save $1,800, they get a $9,000 match. They've got $10,800 to use either towards a home purchase or a home repair. So that's a pretty great program. The cool thing is we can layer that with our down payment assistance funds and other things like that. So they can come into this with a pretty decent amount to put down on a home. And as we know, the market keeps growing and the need keeps getting higher for that down payment. One of the really cool things that our agency did in response to the 2020 wildfires, Melanie and I got together with some other people in our organization. We really brainstormed, how can we step up and how can we support the community? And so what we did is we launched the Center for Community Resilience, which really focuses on housing navigation and housing counseling for wildfire survivors. And so Melanie's team really focuses on, the rental assistance aspect of things. So really helping people, because when people first lost their home, they were displaced, they were couch surfing, living in hotels, transitional style housing. Melanie's team is really focused on how do we navigate them, how do we assist them through this process in a trauma-informed way, because they've been through a lot of trauma already. Let us help you navigate this process. Let us help you into stable housing, but let's not stop at just getting you to stable housing. How can we make this a continuum? What is your end goal, and how do we help you get there? And so that's where it's become this great partnership between our programs. Is her team really focuses on, kind of that short-term housing. How do we help people into stable rental? If rental's their long-term goal, how do we get them into whatever that goal is? But if they are interested in home ownership, how does her team help with the short term, and then referring them over to where my staff can actually work with them towards home ownership. So we've actually been lucky to get state funding for this program, as well as being able to provide rental assistance and then assistance for home purchase for wildfire survivors. So it's become a really successful program. One exciting statistic that I actually pulled this morning, which was pretty cool. We've actually assisted 23 wildfire survivor households with a home purchase in the last 2 months. So the availability of housing is increasing, which is nice. I love to hear that Ashland's, planning more housing, that you guys are doing that. But yeah, the availability of housing is coming back, and it's really nice to see that, we're approaching the 2-year anniversary. So it's exciting. It's been a slow process. It's been frustrating, but it's exciting to see. But that's my time. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bryn Morrison. I'm the Financial Systems Manager for the City of Ashland Finance Department. And this is Judy Hedgepeth. She's our Customer Service Supervisor. So we're here to talk today about our utility assistance programs, also answer any questions that you might have along the way. He gave us so many props. It was great. He led right into it. So we also, just everything we've talked about, we work really closely with many of the agencies that are here today. So that is a very great group of folks that get together, and we all work really closely together. And that is the main thing that people need to remember is reach out, ask. There is that help available. It's just communicate. Just call us, and we're happy to help. So during the winter months, we have our Ashland Low Income Energy Assistance Program, which is a 50% reduction off of the electric charges. It's income-based qualification also. If folks make less than 65% of the Oregon median income, they qualify. And it can be for either 6 or 3 months. The maximum amount that they could have the reduction is $300. We have a senior and disabled income reduction as well, and that's a year-round discount. So that is something that is income-based as well. We have a one-time energy emergency heat assistance that's income-based. That's $100 off of their utility bill balance. One program that I was asked to speak about also is our Roundup program. That is a great way for the community to donate. All they need to do is they can send us an email. We have our form on our website, and what it does is it rounds up the utility bills to the next dollar, and all of those funds then go to support others who need assistance. So we're happy to answer any questions about that as well. Just some statistics. The Ashland Low Income Energy Assistance Program, roughly about 300 households a year qualify for that, and it's about $120,000 a year that discount is. The senior discount is approximately 260 households a year, and that one is close to about $100,000 discount. During the pandemic, we instituted a moratorium on delinquent processing for 2 years. And coming back out of the pandemic and trying to help folks get back on their feet, the city actually has 6 and 12-month payment plans, which is longer than we typically would do. Typically, it would be 3 months. But we have offered that, and we also offer for commercial as well, 6-month payment plans, where we take their past due balance and we divide it over that time, and they pay their current charges along with a portion each month, as well as encouraging them to contact assistance agencies. We have a conservation program that also can help lower utility costs, and it could be for property owners or it could be for tenants as well. We perform free energy audits and water audits. So if folks are interested in that, please visit the city website. There's also incentive programs there that can help lower the utility costs. So I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. Thank you all. We want to take some time to hear from you. Rich, would you be the mic runner here? Oh, you won't? Okay. That way you can just raise your hand and stay where you are. But speak into the mic. I'd ask that you be concise, because I think there are a lot of people here who are likely wanting a chance to talk. This is a chance not only to ask questions, because we've got a huge bank of resources up here, but also to advocate as specifically in relation to the housing production strategy for things that you want to make sure are included in that, or things that you question about the direction that the city is going. Anything that you want to say. So the floor is open. Back here.
I'm Karen Caldwell. I'm a member, I live here in Ashland, but I'm also a member of a group called the Crisis Response Network. We're working on expanding crisis, mental health, behavioral health, crisis response programs in the county. One thing that's, I think, a piece that I haven't heard about is supportive housing for people with behavioral health issues, concerns. And there is an example of one project that's going up. Who is it? Columbia Care is sponsoring it over by the Road Credit Union. That is one option for people to help them receive supportive housing while they are going through recovery. The data shows that housing concerns for people with behavioral health problems are essential, that you have to have a place to live. You can't recover without a place to live. And one of the best features of a supportive housing is to have mixed housing, people without those particular challenges mixed in with a group of people who are receiving supportive services. And that's one of the best practices for these. And I would like to encourage the city to consider ways to expand on that kind of project.
Thank you. We're very excited about the Columbia Care Project because that is a huge need in this city and the first housing that's come along in quite a long time. So.
Thank you. I'm George Kramer. This is probably a question for Brandon. I'm impressed with the questions you're asking about future direction in this survey. Well done. I notice about 12 or 13 of them are simple policy changes. Things like not allowing single-family homes being built in multifamily zones, which I think I've advocated for about 2 decades now. Things like increasing infill and density. And so my question is, why aren't we just doing that? Why do we have a survey? I know it's a lot to do, but I also know it's been on the plate for 2 decades or more.
Sure. And I do think it has large support for a number of those policy changes. Unfortunately, it's not as universally supported as you might think. There is, for instance, historic districts with nobody in the room is more astute on that regard than you, George, that our historic districts are filled with single-family homes on single lots in a multifamily zone. So just establishing a requirement that to not allow single-family homes in multifamily zones could have impacts on historic districts. So these kind of things need to be looked at more carefully. But I think you're right that these issues are things that have been discussed for decades and can be included in a housing production strategy so that the legwork of going through that code amendment process, which unfortunately is not as simple as just flipping a switch. You have to look at all the potential implications before making those code changes, and that's the efforts that would be directed through adoption of a housing production strategy to have that as a priority use. So in filling out those surveys, if you think that's something that is a high priority, I would suggest that you incorporate that in your response, because ultimately when it comes to the Housing and Human Services Commission and the Planning Commission and the City Council, who are the decision makers on these things, they're going to be looking for public input along those lines. So.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Bob Kaplan. Wow, this has really been great. Lots of great information. I've got a question for Access and also for the city. I'm really excited that I didn't know that you do so much weatherization at Access. And I'm wondering what's the constraint on doing even more? You said about 110 per year. Is it staff? Is it money? Is it, what is that? You said 60 in Ashland over the last several years. That's one thing. And then for the city, I know that Access seems like it offers energy assistance year round. But the city only offers the energy assistance for low income unless you're a senior or have a disability for the winter months. These days with summer months also meaning a high utility costs. I wonder if the city would consider expanding that to year-round.
It's a really good question about our weatherization program, and the challenge that we face is funding. We average about 110 homes a year, and that's all we can do with the funding that we have. And that number has actually started decreasing over the last few years due to increasing costs. We used to average about 120 homes a year, and that number has kind of started dropping just a little bit more because of the approach that we have to trying to do as much as possible to a home and try to maximize the amount of savings that we can get, rather than just stopping at a certain point and trying to get more homes done. There are restrictions to the programs about how often we can weatherize a home and different things like that. So we don't want to put people in a situation where we only do so much and then they have to wait several years before they're even eligible to try to get more work done. So, but funding is the answer. We do get funded from both federal, state, and utility programs, but it doesn't go far enough to weatherize all the homes.
So that's a great question, and that has been discussed, and funding is the answer as well on that one. Our electric fund, our water fund, our wastewater fund these programs. So if there is the directive from council that we should expand that, we are happy to do that, happy to administer them.
I'm Cynthia Detman, and I'm with the Coalition to Preserve Ashland's Mobile Home Parks. And Dolores and I both live in Wingspread Mobile Home Park, and I'm really happy to see that you've listed what is really a low-hanging fruit, which is to preserve affordable housing. So Ashland has 3 mobile home parks, and we estimate around 206 households, and if you add up all the humans, I'm guessing a lot of them are single people in single homes, but there are also there's some families as well, especially at the Upper Pines RV Park. So it's probably around, I'm guessing, 350-ish human beings that already live in affordable housing, and Oregon law allows a park owner to either sell a park, which could raise rents, or even more dramatically, close a park. And that's been happening around Oregon and around the country. The reason to close a park, of course, is to get rid of all those mobile homes, stop having a park there, and sell that land to a developer who would likely create upper type of housing. These are people who are a lot of senior citizens, a lot of people of color, Latinx working families, especially at the Upper Pines RV Park, and a lot of families there. I think there's 7 or 8 Latino families there at Upper Pines. People with disabilities, people who've lived in the community for many, many years, and there's no way they could live in Ashland. We could live in Ashland if we didn't have these parks. Oregon law allows a mobile home park to be closed with 1 year's notice, and a single-wide mobile home owner gets $6,000, and a double-wide mobile home owner gets $8,000 under Oregon law. And you basically lose your home and you lose your investment. So your home might be worth, $175,000, $200,000 in the current housing market, but you're going to lose the whole thing if the park closes. So not only is it an issue of rent and affordability, but it's also an opportunity for low-income people to own homes. So it's the mobile home parks represent low-income home ownership, which is also important to encourage. So I'm really glad to see that that's already listed, and I certainly advocate for that to be one of the low-hanging fruit. What we're advocating for is a replication of an ordinance that Portland passed in 2018, which now preserves 56 out of 57 mobile home parks in Portland. They can be closed, but it would be very difficult for the owners to close those parks because they have to go through a rezoning process. So what we're asking the city to do is to put our parks into literally a mobile home park zone, which means that that land is going to be forever until something else happens, a mobile home park. It can't be closed. If it's sold, it has to continue to be a mobile home park. The ordinance can provide for some incentives for the owners. There could be tax breaks, there could be other things that could happen to help owners to create more affordable units in a mobile home park as well. So anyway, we're here to just speak on behalf of that, and I'm really glad to see that, vote for that as a strategy.
Good evening. I just want to add on what the lady said before. Mobile zoning is mobile park zoning is very, very important. What I think is more important that it's not just the mobile park zoning, it's actually allowed to people to own their own lots, because this is the biggest problem. So the city does not allow 2,000 square feet lots, and this is the problem. So in those zoning, people must be able to own their own lots. This is the key for people owning the future.
Okay. One of our long-term goals, but it depends on the will and goodwill and good hearts of the landowners, is that we can also become a cooperative and purchase the park from the owner and run the park ourselves with no profit involved. And what that does is it stabilizes the rents. So, for example, we've already talked to Casa of Oregon, which is a Northern Oregon nonprofit, and if our owner was willing to sell the park to us, it would have to be, close to a market value price. And Wingspread, as of last year, they estimated the land would probably be a cost of about $11.4 million. But this nonprofit has access to state and federal funds to help us purchase the park and run it ourselves. So cooperative ownership is also something that I think is really important to encourage. If the city has the opportunity to support cooperative ownership, we would own that land cooperatively. And it's happened, I think CASA has helped something like 12 or 13, maybe 17, I can't remember the number, parks to purchase their own park and run it themselves, and the rents stabilize. So first the rents go up initially, and the city might be able to help with that if that happens. With the low-income members of our communities could help get some rental assistance, or in that case it would be membership assistance to the cooperative. And then the rents stabilize over the long run versus privately owned mobile home parks. The rents keep going up and up and up and up. Oregon does have a rent cap, a rent increase cap, but those rents are still going to keep going up. So we should be watching for opportunities to support cooperative ownership.
And Cynthia, I would wonder just briefly if anyone on the panel, I know that we do now have some cooperatively owned manufactured home parks in our valley, which we did not have before. And I don't know if any of you were partners in that.
First, I want to say those are great ideas. So there is some state legislation right now that would actually incentivize keeping manufactured home parks affordable and requiring first right of refusal for cooperatives or nonprofit ownership. So your Representative Marsh, is such a huge advocate for those measures. So those are big things to watch for. So the Valley typically has not had any cooperative work. Our agencies worked closely with CASA for many years. They're a statewide nonprofit. And Southern Oregon has, we have the second most number of manufactured home parks in the state, in our county, only second to Clackamas County, I think, is number one. But we had, up until this past year, we've had 0 cooperatively or nonprofit-owned parks. That is actually changing. We have 2 parks. CASA has purchased 1, and they are in development of it to be cooperatively owned. It is in the city of Talent. And so there's probably more information coming on that one. They don't have a lot of information yet, but Access is in communication with them, and we will probably be partnering with them closely as far as connecting them with income qualifying households to purchase in there that are interested in that model. There is another park that is right on the edge of Phoenix that was affected by the fires that is actually rebuilding and is nonprofit owned. So it's actually going to be owned by the Housing Authority of Jackson County. And so they will actually keep it affordable in perpetuity because, they will have, ordinances on it as far as the amount of time, but Housing Authority, as we all know, their goal is just to keep them affordable forever. So it's exciting to see that change and that shift. And it's exciting to see because historically we've always had bigger corporations, that own these mobile home parks. They look at them as, money makers. And it's nice to see that they're starting to see that there is a way to make these affordable, have nonprofits or cooperatively owned parks work. And so it's exciting to watch both of those. They're in development currently, both of them are. But it's a model that I think will start to spread as we see their success.
Hi, my name is Connie Saldana. I work for Senior and Disability Services of Rogue Valley Council of Governments. And I have worked for 19, 20 years administering a program for homeless people with disabilities. I'm not currently working on that program. That money from that program actually went to ORA, which is a good thing. They're still serving homeless people with disabilities. But I wanted to point out another aspect of housing that is so key. I haven't heard words on it. I can't tell that some of this printing's pretty small, whether it's actually already in the housing production plan, but that is accessibility, wheelchair accessibility. I work with a program right now called Lifelong Housing Certification, where we actually do certify homes as accessible, either visitable, so someone could come to your home and get around and get to the bathroom if they're in a wheelchair or a walker or crutches. And then the next level up is a house that's fully accessible for the resident. Well, I'll tell you right now, we don't have enough houses that are fully accessible for current residents, let alone the people that want to age in place. There's a lot in here about the population of Ashland skewing older now. I'm one of them. I'm already skewed. But first of all, surveys show that most people, 80% of people, would prefer to age in their own homes. And not only is it more comfortable, but if you need long-term care, it's a lot cheaper for yourself or for the state that might be paying for it, taxpayers that might be paying for your care. But also, people want to stay in their own communities, and they don't want to be forced to live in a facility of some sort. And you know what, if you break your hip, you go to the hospital, you come out, and you cannot get in your front door, you're going to either be in a rehab center for a while, or you may never be able to return home. And that sounds very dire, but believe me, working for Senior and Disability Services for all this time, it's not that uncommon. Okay. So that's what I see as the need, and maybe a potential way of sort of resolving it by at least using our standards that were developed from international and U.S. Residential codes. So all the measurements are meet standards, and but there are also things that cities can do in the way of policy, land use, incentives for builders. We have about 122 homes that are certified in our valley now. Most of them are in Central Point, and one development, Twin Creeks. They don't build anything that's not a house that can be certified, because they're seeing that not only is it a good thing to build homes where people are safer from falling and they're more comfortable, they're safer and more comfortable for anyone of any age. And I always give the example of being able to open the door with your elbow if you're carrying your groceries, right? What age does that stop? So anyway, there are just many suggestions that City Council could consider in the way of incentives for builders. That's only for new homes, and only a certain amount of the population could buy a new home. So maybe there could also be incentives for remodeling a home. I know there's a push at the national level to have like a tax benefit of up to $30,000 that you could take out of your retirement or something like that without paying taxes on it if you remodel your home. So for accessibility, I should add that. So I would just encourage that as many mentions of accessibility be put into the production strategy plan as possible, because guess what? Plans are used to make funding choices. And we have to have it in writing for people to remember if the city's giving grants, or anybody else might that's giving money might want to look and see what the priorities are of the city. So I hope that you will consider that as Ashland is aging and most people want to stay in their homes, that it makes sense to make homes accessible. Thank you.
Hey there, my name is Dana Greenblatt, and I work with the Rogue Action Center, and I appreciate the presentation, really useful. And I was curious, and I might have missed it, but I was curious about how demographic information factors into the data that you presented, just to see if there are certain groups that are overrepresented in the rent burden space, and how those groups are specifically being engaged to get input for the housing production strategy.
I can speak to the first part on that in terms of how the demographic information, actually the housing production strategy is the second phase of a project. The first was a housing capacity analysis. So really that was just looking at how much land is within the city and how many housing units can it accommodate. And in looking at that, can we accommodate the projected population growth over the next 20 years? And really, not just population growth, but what types of households? If our households are getting smaller, do we need to have as many 3-bedroom units built newly if people are going to be aging out of their 3-bedroom unit and making that available, existing housing stock? So there's that continuum of housing that is a factor. In terms of the outreach efforts, the Housing and Human Services Commission has taken a leadership role on that in terms of reaching out to community members that don't typically come to meetings like this, and reach out to SOU students, populations, and manufactured housing parks, and we'll be doing so. Part of the survey's effort is the first part of that survey is really to kind of get some demographic information about the experiences people have had with finding housing in the community. And that really does factor in. It's one thing to build new housing units, but if people still can't achieve stable housing because they can't come up with first, last deposit, those are issues that need to be addressed as well. So again, it's an ongoing effort to get as many voices at the table as possible. So with the work that you do, I hope you be able to kind of spread the word about this project, and I would guide them. And I think the Housing and Human Services Commission can address some of that. And Rich Rohde has raised his hand.
Yeah, Rich Rohde. When we look at the housing production strategy, the demographic that jumps off at me, and maybe you, is that 1/3 of every household in Ashland is low or extremely low income. That's a lot of folks, and many of them are families, and they are the ones that are the most likely to be gentrified out of our city. That's why we lose kids, because that's the group that is. And this is the sentence that followed that statement, is that group of people will never be served by the market system. The only way that we get houses to them is with public funds that go to provide housing. And we can do that with our housing trust fund. We can do that in so many ways, but it requires more funding. So when you look at this survey, and I hope everybody will fill it out now and hand it in. It only takes like 10 minutes. It's not very long. But that way we can get it in. But some of those policies are about how do we get more resources into our housing trust fund and into the housing that is really needed in Ashland. And that's hard because when we ask our city officials, do you want to raise anything? And developers are going to say no. So that's the place where we're going to need your input and your help to get those passed. Because if we have a robust amount of dollars and resources to put in for that level of folks, as you hear with these partners, we can do some good. Thank you. So turn them in. If you can't find a pen, somebody will give them.
Well, and I also should add that on the handout is a QR code, which will take you directly to the website where you can also find the survey online. And so you can do it there online. We tried to make it really easy for you. Oh, I'm sorry, Dia.
I actually have a question. Sorry, Brandon. You're going to be so happy I'm next to you. I am hopeful as an Ashland resident that in the housing production strategy, and I promise to take a survey with me, that creative and innovative new approaches to building are included, because the 3D imaging printed homes couldn't happen in Ashland. I know people tried and it couldn't work. And that's 84 units of home ownership and permanently affordable because it's a land trust. And there's also vertically integrated stackable housing that's inexpensive and great and looks really great. I mean, I've been to see some of the apartment complexes that are made by Blockable in Aurora and in Colorado. And I just hope there's some creativity allowed in the new strategy.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think all the elected and appointed officials I've talked to also agree with that sentiment. I would question whether the concrete homes couldn't have been built in Ashland. I think they could have. I think that land values are one factor that obviously comes into play when trying to build affordable housing. But as far as the building code, it's the same building code in Ashland, Medford, Portland, statewide. So if something qualifies as meeting building code in Medford, it will qualify as meeting building code in Ashland. I do think that there are measures outside the city's control in terms of statewide building code implementation that can be addressed to facilitate some of the more innovative housing. We have seen in Ashland cob houses, rammed earth houses, a number of innovative strategies. Unfortunately, a lot of housing types that under current building code require engineering, and I think that might have been one of the issues with the concrete 3D printed house in order to show that they do meet building code. And that adds costs. It makes them less affordable. But nonetheless, the fire, life, and safety issues are also paramount. So, you know, I think that there will be movement to where state law allowing alternative housing types is a great strategy, and something that is noted in the housing production strategy is something to look at further.
I think that's great. I think that we have to have hip pocket plans because the state had millions of dollars to invest in new housing. And if people in Ashland had had hip pocket plans ready to develop, people ready to commit, we could have dumped those millions of dollars in Ashland.
You should call me.
Call you. Okay, I will.
We have a comment under.
I promise.
I'm a small landlord looking to get into development, and my experience is that pretty much everything is at the density limit, and also constrained by parking minimums. And that tells me, because I'm sitting on $1 million looking to construct some housing, and I can't. And that tells me that systemically, thank you, this is my partner. And that tells me that systemically the market is trying to provide housing and being prevented from doing so. And so I think if we make some major zoning changes, I personally will generate some housing, and I think we'll see a lot of other people do that as well.
Hi. Are planning fees increased, or are they higher for non-traditional structures like the 3D printed pieces?
So to start with, systems development charges are the biggest fee for new buildings. Those are fees that cities collect to cover water, sewer, transportation, and parks in terms of the impacts of a new dwelling unit. They are no different for any type of construction. They're typically based on the square footage of the unit or just the number of units. So one unit pays for 1 unit's worth of SDCs. The exception to that, there's a couple exceptions. One, Ashland actually reduces those fees by 50% for units that are less than 500 square feet. Again, an incentive base to promote small units. They reduce those fees by 75%, or not by 75%, to 75% of what they were for units that are less than 800 square feet. And the last exception to the systems development charges is the complete waiver of those charges if units are deed restricted as affordable housing. So in all of those circumstances, there is actually an incentive to provide units, or you could see it as a contribution from the city in terms of non-collection of fees that otherwise would be required for a market rate unit or units that are larger in size. Does that answer the question? Thanks.
I have 2 questions. I know the city has 10 pallet houses sitting someplace. What are you going to do with those? What's the plan? And the second one is, somebody has told me that 75% of our Latinos here in the Valley are undocumented, and yet they provide so many important services to us. So all the services that your agencies talked about, who's got services that they can provide to undocumented people? Oh, that's very good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
I would just say that we provide all of the services that our funding allows us to documented and undocumented life. Every single one of my state programs do not require citizenship status, and some of my federal programs don't either. And so I think once again, to just ensure that people are, our goal, we do outreach, and we are at a lot of the pop-ups that are done by Rogue Action, and we are also do a lot of our outreach ourselves along the Greenway, and just we're out in Butte Falls, we come to Ashland, we are a lot of places to ensure people are aware of the services that provided, and we absolutely, if citizenship is not required by the funding, we don't even ask if that is something that an individual or a family has.
Same here at the same time. And we don't get state or federal money.
Yeah, we may have a few funding sources that may require that, but every one of our programs, we have funding sources that have the flexibility to where we can provide services. So it just, each individual person's circumstance when they come to us, our goal is to provide them service. So our goal is to tell them yes, provide them what they need, and we have the flexibility within multiple funding sources, different things like that to do that. So that's an obstacle we have all the time.
And Dolores? Yeah.
I just want to add one topic that all of our client-facing documents are also in Spanish and English. So if it's a document that is going to be to the client, is going to be in the preferred language.
And I would just add, Dolores, that federal HUD funds that the city receives and affordable housing trust funds that the city sets aside out of our general fund also do not require any documentation. So our funding would support undocumented people as well. And then just to speak briefly about the pallet shelters, they are in storage currently. We don't have any immediate plans for them. We did do some outreach before we moved them to see if there was any other organizations or churches that would be willing to host them. And at this time there weren't. We will probably do some outreach again in the future with the Housing and Human Services Commission, or we will look at whether we can sell them to an entity, and then with that funding that we recoup, we could potentially use to support more housing. But none of those decisions have been made, I would say, at this time. Yep.
Just as a brief comment with regard to the 10 pallet shelters that the city owns, they are in storage. I'm grateful that they are in a safe place. I'm currently working with a couple of existing faith groups right now and talking about how we can probably place more of those little pallet shelters at our local faith group. So I've been working on it.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on the pallet structures. The city actually owns 13 pallet structures. It's a minor distinction, but 3 of them are currently in use at, I believe, the Unitarian Church. So it's a great example of a faith-based organization working with the city to locate those and provide what really is emergency housing. And for people that aren't familiar with pallets, they are a 10-foot by 10-foot aluminum frame, plexiglass, non-insulated unit. So it's really a robust tent, for lack of a better description, but it does provide a needed lockable place where individuals that are currently experiencing homelessness can store their stuff and sleep in a safe environment. So electricity, and we even installed air conditioning and heat in them. So they're much better than sleeping in someone's car or other really emergency housing situations that people find themselves in.
Brandon, can you put up on the screen the web version of the survey so that people know what that looks like? If everybody in this room can help sort of spread the word about the web-based version of that survey. I'll be spreading it on social media, like all over the place. I'm heavily on Facebook. Another thing I would ask, those of you who know people under 50 years old who live in Ashland, please beg them to apply for vacancies on the Housing and Human Services Commission. I'm old, Rich is really old. I'm not going to talk about Linda Rapon. But we need the voices of people who are in that younger age bracket, who have families, who cannot find places to live in Ashland, who are getting pushed out of the housing that they are living in because the units are being converted to family use or they're being flipped. All of us in this room, can I ask for a show of hands? How many of you in this room at the moment know somebody who's looking for a place to live in this town and can't find it? Okay. We need to have those people who are in that sort of predicament, who tend to be younger in my experience. I would love to have a couple of folks from that age bracket on our commission, or committee, Joe, whatever it turns into. So I certainly know those folks, but we need to have them present. The last thing that I'd like to ask Joe Vollmer probably for help with is we struggle with emergency weather shelter here in Ashland, as our city manager knows all too well, and Linda knows all too well. We have to have some way to help fund those operations. I don't know where the money comes from. I don't know how to do it in a way that doesn't burn out community volunteers, myself being one of them. We need help, and I don't know how to get it. We're asking too much of Linda Reed. I'm going to speak up for her in her behalf. She won't speak up for herself, but I will do it for her. We need help. We need to have a solid process that includes community partners for dealing with climate crisis-driven weather shelters, heating, cooling shelters in the summer, and then winter shelter when it gets cold. I'm anticipating 2 to 3 weeks in winter and probably 2 to 3 weeks in summer in coming years of need here in Ashland. We don't have good facility. We don't have a large enough space. We don't have public facilities. I know you guys in Access help Medford with theirs. And I don't know what you can help us with here, but if there is something that our area-wide community action agency can help us with, we would be incredibly grateful. So we need to talk more.
I know you called out Joe, but I'm going to answer this one because the Medford Severe Weather Shelter is one of the programs that I oversee and am responsible for. And it is a lot of work, and it's tireless, and we really rely heavily on our volunteers to support. I think that there's a lot that can be done in how the volunteer network is engaged with and the supports that are provided to them in terms of training and schedule flexibility and that type of thing. It is a partnership with the city for, as well as the state for funding to ensure that we've got the ability to operate. We are just about ready to get our forever home with the Medford Severe Weather Shelter, and I am so incredibly thankful that we're able to do that because having to identify different buildings over the last 2 years that have been willing to allow us into their space has been a challenge. But I think that we did a lot at the Medford Library during the summer and then just wherever we could possibly open up during the winter. But I'm happy to talk more because it is a program that is near and dear to my heart. I think we literally are saving lives. I think every day most of the work that we do are literally saving lives, but I think the Severe Weather Shelter is at the core of it literally saves lives, but for opening. So I'm happy to talk offline. I know that we've connected before regarding it and it hasn't come to fruition, so please reach back out.
Just a question and a remark or adding on what Brandon said. I think in Ashland the problem is not building code, it's neighbors. They don't want certain neighbors living near them. So this is the main problem, not the building codes. The second thing is actually a question regarding, maybe it's access, I'm not sure. As a landlord, I do have tenants that get paid, I get rent by access, and they're paying actually market rate. I'm a market rate landlord. Many times I see, and it's a little bit cruel, I see people coming and they have voucher, but they're not even close to market rate. And so they have a double whammy. They have a hard time qualify because they cannot show income, but we could work on it, but they cannot even pay the market rate. So when they're getting vouchers, I hope they'll get the right voucher, or there's a way for them, maybe they could add their own money to it. I know there's a lot of codes about it. I'm not sure how it works. But sometimes I had people like 3 bedrooms, 2 people with vouchers wanted to move in, but they cannot do it because it's not allowed. So I'm not sure how it works, but maybe it could give more opportunity for people actually to get market rate rentals with vouchers.
So that is actually a really good point with the double voucher roommate situation. I know that the Housing Authority of Jackson County is the one who is responsible for administering voucher programs. I also do know that most of my state programs that I administer or my team administers does have the capacity or ability to subsidize a subsidy, which is what that is. So there is the ability to tack on if somebody doesn't quite qualify. So again, reaching out for assistance and helping, allowing for the people who understand the nuances of state and federal programs is really, really important in this space. I would also say to advocate for your state representatives and people that can advocate to HUD that fair market rate is, the data is garbage. It is 3 or 5 years old, and so whatever was fair market then is not true to what is now. I think that that's the same when we talk about area median income. I think right now we're in a really unique area where income didn't increase or increased very, very slowly. And right now it's not, we're seeing significant increases in income. And so when we look, people are not being able to afford anything but not qualifying because area median income is from old data, not now data, and we look at your income from today. And so I think that both of those places are places that we need to advocate to our state and federal decision makers. We need new systems to look at that. So we're looking at true snapshots of what's happening in the now and not what was happening 3 to 5 years ago.
Thank you.
A quick follow-up question on vouchers. Can you provide vouchers to people that want to rent an apartment, that like a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment where they're sharing a kitchen rather than having everybody having their own kitchen facilities?
Well, again, I don't administer vouchers. I administer rental assistance.
Okay.
And so the rental assistance that I administer depends on the leaseholder. So we can do shared, depending on the program, right? Yeah. There are several different programs that have different requirements.
Okay. So I think the Housing Authority can't do that.
The Housing Authority can't, but I know that they are looking at how they can voucher in rooms for rent. And so they're looking at how they can get creative within their rules. I am not a representative of the Housing Authority, so I would not be able to tell you for sure, but I do know in many of the conversations I have with representatives of the Housing Authority, whether it be through my veterans program that we work really closely with the HUD-VASH office, or just housing choice vouchers and things along those lines, that they are looking at how to be flexible within that. And I know that the federal government has all of these rules that they set into place that make it challenging to navigate, but I also think that if you've got the right people in the right seats, that we can make it through those navigation places and make good progress in being creative.
Thanks.
So I think it looks like everybody who's wanted to speak publicly has. I kind of need some help on the next steps here because Echo and Rich, can you come up here? Just they are the Housing Commission members who are working on the housing production strategy task force committee. What's it called? Hi. Because right now, all of your input is being absorbed by these people who provide services, multiple city council members. Thank you, Tanya. And Joe Lassard, our city manager. People are listening to what you're saying. And the survey will make a big difference in putting in writing in a plan what we're going to do. So I want Echo to speak to that for a minute.
Okay. Let's see. Getting feedback on the survey, which you have in hard copy, but encouraging people to fill that out online who could not be here today. Incredibly useful and incredibly important. The housing production strategy and the previous housing capacity analysis, that project is being sort of ramrodded, that's an old word, by Eco Northwest. They call it Echo Northwest, but it confuses people if I call it that. So I call it Eco Northwest, so it doesn't, Tanya, it sounds like I'm talking about myself. If I say Echo Northwest, so I'm going to say Eco Northwest. They do an amazing job. It's Beth Goodman is our liaison to Eco Northwest, and she's done amazing work over the last 2 years, really. So that menu of strategies that you see at the back of the survey is based on work from Eco Northwest over the last 2 years. Getting feedback on how people react to those menu items. I know that's nerdy and some of it's confusing, but do the best you can and encourage other people to get back to us. Some of those things we frankly can do, George, pretty easily. We do need to have a beer. And some of them will take more work than just flipping a switch, as Brandon mentioned. But we're serious about it. So soon, let's see, our next meeting, Linda help me with this, or Brandon help me with this. This is the timeline for the process for the housing production strategy. Thank you very much. Let's see, so Planning Commission meeting to review the draft is coming up when?
So the next meeting of the committee is going to be at the end of August. Is that right, Brandon?
It is not. It's actually going to be in October. So there's a bit of time to fill out the survey. We want to get as much feedback as possible. And I will say that the earlier we get information, the better at formulating strategies.
Right.
But throughout the process, there's still opportunities for public comment. So the project will keep evolving, and strategies will be added to the list.
Right.
Strategies will be removed. But everything in some sense is not written in stone until such point as it comes to the Planning Commission City Council and gets adopted. So there'll be opportunities for public comment through the online survey through October. We may at that point modify the survey to reflect the working document at that time. And then in the beginning of 2023 is really when we get into the public hearing process in which decisions are refined further and more formulated into what is likely to be in the final plan for consideration by the City Council. And we, at that website that I mentioned, the ashland.or.us/HPS, will continue to keep an archive of both public meetings as well as opportunities to contribute so that people can go there as a one-stop shop to figure out where it is in process and how they can plug in.
So the City Council ultimately makes final decisions about all of this. So the role of the Housing and Human Service Commission is purely advisory. We've done a lot of homework. We've got lots of nerdy stuff in our heads. But ultimately it's City Council. So we have some candidates in the room. Some of you I know, and we have some currently serving council members as well. And the mayor was here, but I think she's gone now. So this is a particularly critical issue for the city, and the City Council is going to look different next year. We don't know how different, but it'll be somewhat different. And there is no more important issue for Ashlanders than housing. And all of the issues raised here today, from universal design to why can't we have rent control, which I'm constantly explaining to people, or do Airbnbs really affect the availability of rental housing, and what are the Ashland regulations on traveler accommodations in Airbnbs? And I know Brandon deals with this all the time too. And why is housing so unaffordable, and why can't we just flip a switch and make it all better? And a lot of things, the city can't do. The city doesn't have control over what's called the financialization of housing, which has led to people seeking passive income from flipping houses, which has led to large corporations buying up mobile home parks and then turning them into other kind of housing. It's we can't control things like people using their houses as quote unquote ATMs. That's been going on for a long time in this community. There's so many things we can't control, but there are things that we can do. And so some of those ideas are what you see at the back of that survey. Getting that feedback to City Council ultimately, who will be making these decisions, is absolutely critical. And so I know that folks here will be listening. And that's kind of my next step speech.
All right, I'll just say just in finishing here, we've kindly had Wanda Borland do the video for this. And I think we're going to get a really good quality of it. And it'll be out, I think, on social media and
on the city website.
And on the city website. And I say that because we sort of made a mistake about choosing the time for this. And we got a lot of feedback on that. But we've got this place for free, so here we are. But we really want to encourage people to watch it online, respond, and be part of it. And then I'll just turn it back to...
Now I have 2 microphones. Thank you. Kathy, Colley?
Just a quick logistical question. If we build it out in person here, who do we get?
Rich. Or Echo. Or Linda. Great. I just want to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Ashland Hills Hotel for hosting us here. Thank you to Gina for making that happen. We really appreciate your involvement and really let's have a huge round of applause for our panelists. I love to end on time. Thank you very much.